Hello Year 11 and welcome to your 7th and final GCSE Religious Studies revision video for Paper 1 Christian Practices. My name is Miss Smith. I'm one of the Religious Studies consultants for the Federation, and I've created this video to help support you prepare for your exam. In order to do this, I'll be using the revision checklist that you have available to you. You can find this checklist on Padlet in Student Essentials, or you can ask your teacher and they will be able to provide one for you. This video is going to focus on the final topic in Christian practices, the importance of the worldwide church. So on your checklist, you will see this section right at the bottom. So you have to know the importance of the worldwide church working for reconciliation, the importance of the worldwide church, how Christian churches respond to persecution, and you need to know the importance of the worldwide church, the work of one of CAFOD, Catholic Agency for Overseas Development, Christian Aid, or Tear Fund. So you don't need to know all three, you just need to know one of those. And then obviously we've got our 3 columns for you to tick off whether you're confident that you know 2 ways that those things happen, the importance of doing those things, and a quote about each of them. And the reason for this is because if you're able to do that, then you will be prepared for any 1, 4 or 6 mark question on the exam paper. Plus, you'll be giving yourself some great foundational knowledge to help approach those 12 mark questions. So all of our revision is going to be structured around this format to help you prepare for the different styles of questions on the paper. So let's start by looking in detail at reconciliation. So reconciliation is the action of bringing people together again after conflict. Then we need to know 2 ways that Christians do this. And I think the best 2 ways is to first of all start with specific organisations that are set up to allow reconciliation to come about. The one that I've taught is Truth and Reconciliation Commission. You might have done Corrymeela in Ireland, or you might have done Coventry Cathedral. The other thing that I think is a really interesting way to respond to this question is to look at reconciliation through salvation. So Jesus' death on the cross reconciled God with humans. So you can use all your knowledge about Jesus' death and salvation in your reconciliation answer, which I think is really helpful. So why is this important? Well, obviously it's a loving action. To bring people together again after conflict is a loving action. But also we've got to think that this is the reason why Jesus came to earth. Jesus came to earth to reconcile humans to God. So therefore, for our quote, for our 6 and 12 markers, we can use love your neighbour, but also we could use John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that whoever believes in him shall not die, but have eternal life. So eternal life means that you can have eternal life with God in heaven because that relationship has been reconciled. Okay, let's have a look at persecution. So the definition of this word persecution is hostility and ill treatment faced by individuals or groups for their religious beliefs. And we need to know 2 ways that Christians respond to persecution in the worldwide church in order to be able to do our 1 or 4 mark question. So I would say that the first way is a short-term response. So how do they respond in the short term? So obviously they're going to pray for people that are being persecuted, but also they might provide emergency support. So they might have to quickly go and help somebody, give them food, water, access to emergency services, etc. Then a long-term support for persecution might be to start to campaign against it. And so to put pressure on governments to deal with it, to start up campaigns, things like that. Also, they might create a situation where they're smuggling Bibles into countries. So if it is illegal to be a Christian in a country, they might have to smuggle Bibles into that country so that Christians can read them. And this is a bit more of a long-term plan. So why is it important then that Christians respond to persecution? Well, obviously it helps Christians put into practice the teachings of Jesus. Because this is a good work, it can help them to achieve salvation through those good works, but also we also know it's a loving action. So there's loads of quotes in the Bible that we can use in a question on persecution, if it's a 6 marker or a 12 marker. We can reference the parable of the sheep and the goats, because one of the lines in that parable is, I was in prison and you visited me. So one way that Christians face persecution around the world is that they are often imprisoned for being Christian, because it is illegal in that country to be a Christian. So that's a really good quote. We can come back to love your neighbour, that it's a loving action to respond to those being persecuted. But actually what's interesting is that Jesus said, blessed are the persecuted. Okay, so happy, rewarded are the persecuted. So that could be used as a way to comfort people that are being persecuted. Okay, remember, when you're using any of those quotes or references, you must mention that they come from the Bible. All right, otherwise you won't get that mark in your 6 markers. Okay, let's have a look at the work of Christian charity. Now, this is slightly different. This is slightly complicated, because each of you would have done a different charity. So some of you would have done CAFOD, some of you are going to have done Christian Aid, and some of you are going to do Tearfund. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk generally about Christian charities, and then you would just need to apply that to the specific charity that you have done. So let's have a look at 2 ways that Christian charities, so whether it's CAFOD, whether it's Christian Aid, or whether it's Tearfund, they're all going to do similar things. So they're going to do that short-term aid, so emergency relief, food, water, shelter, etc., and maybe emergency raising of money. Okay, and then the other way the Christian charities will help worldwide is through long-term aid. So this could be activism or campaigning, or creating engineering revolution, so that people could be more efficient and effective in growing their own food and making their own income. So why is it important? Why is it that Christian charities work worldwide? Well, obviously it's important because it obeys Jesus' teaching, it demonstrates God's love, and it allows them to get salvation through works. And we've got our classic quotes that we often use in this unit. Parable of the sheep and the goats. I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink, which worked really nicely. We've got love your neighbour. This is about agape love. It's about loving people that are vulnerable, that need aid. But also we've got this idea of faith without works is dead. This is a natural way of expressing your faith in Jesus. So let's have a look at some possible 4-mark questions, so you can see what this topic might look like if it comes up as an exam question. So there's a couple on the screen now. So remember, for your 4-mark questions, these will always be asking you about similar or different ways in which something is done, something is practiced. So 2 different or similar ways that Christians work for reconciliation or respond to persecution. I'm going to model these for you, but it'll be a really good idea if you also practice them under timed conditions. So set yourself a little 4-minute timer, have a go at 1 or 2 of these, and then you can take your answers to your teacher and they can mark them for you. Okay, so here we've got explain 2 similar ways Christians work for reconciliation. So one way is through evangelism, which is telling others about the good news of Jesus. This is so humans have the opportunity to be reconciled with God. A similar way is through a specific reconciliation organisation, for example, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But obviously you could put in Coromila, or you could put in the Coventry Cathedral. This helped reconcile blacks and whites in South Africa after the end of apartheid. So what I've got is I've got 2 simple explanations, and each one has a development. Okay, so the first one, we've looked at evangelism, and I've explained how evangelism links to reconciliation. And in the second one, I've looked at a specific organisation, and I've explained what it is and what they did and why it was needed. Okay, so this is how you can write a model 4-mark answer. It doesn't have to be in full sentences. You must have a simple explanation and a development, and your development could be a who, a what, a why, a where, a when, a how, an example. It doesn't matter as long as you're developing that point. Okay, let's have a look at a second one. So this is explained 2 different ways Christians respond to persecution. All right, so we need to have your simple explanation, your development, another simple explanation of a different point, and then develop that as well. So I have said through long-term and short-term responses, and given an example for each, and then developed it with why they do this. Notice again, it's not in full sentences. This is a really good time-saving tip. So let's have a look at what this might look like. So explain 2 different ways Christians respond to persecution. One way is through short time responses, for example, prayer. This might give strength to endure their persecution. A different way is through a long-term response, for example, campaigning and raising awareness of the persecution. For example, charities like Open Doors runs campaigns to challenge governments to stop persecution in their countries. Okay, let's have a look at some possible 6-mark questions. So this is always going to ask why something is important. In terms of your 6-mark answers, they're going to form a similar structure to your 4-mark one. So simple explanation, development, simple explanation, development, except to get the 5th mark, one of your developments needs to be a quote and a source. And to get your 6th mark, you need to apply the quote to the question. So on the slide, there's some potential questions. Maybe take a screenshot. I'm going to walk through one of those with you so that you know what it looks like, and then you can have a go at the other ones, setting a timer for 6 minutes. So explain 2 reasons why the work of either CAFOD or Christian Aid or Tearfund is important to Christians. Refer to sacred writings or another source of authority in your answer. So what you would have to do is choose one of those 3 charities, so whichever one you have done. I'm just going to do a generic answer so you can see what the structure is like, and then you could add more specific information if you need to. So it is important because it puts into practice Jesus' teaching to help those who are vulnerable. So we've got a simple explanation, we've got our connective, which is underlined. In the parable of the sheep and the goats in the Bible, Jesus said, whatever you do for the least of one of these, you do for me. So we've developed that answer with a quote, and because I put the source of that quote, we will get an extra mark there as well. Okay. This means that the work of, and you can then put the charity in that you've studied, CAFOD or Christian Aid or Tearfund, is important because to Christians, because they are actually helping Jesus. So we've now applied that quote to the question. So that paragraph would get your 4 marks. Simple explanation, development. The development has a quote with the source, so you get an extra mark, and you've applied that quote. It is also important because it is following another of Jesus' teachings, which is to love your neighbour. So a second simple explanation. Giving people who are vulnerable the help they need is a loving action. So that would be 6 out of 6, not in full sentences. You've got your quote, you've got your source, you've applied your quote, and you've got 2 simple explanations and development. Okay, so I've highlighted the things that are important in green. Don't forget to put the source of your quote, otherwise you'll miss out on that mark. So it's really important to remember this. So I hope that gives you a little bit of grounding of the work of the Worldwide Church, as well as how to answer 4 and 6 mark questions. Remember to notice the difference between the work of the local church, which are food banks and street pastors, and the work of the worldwide church, which is reconciliation, persecution, and the work of international charities. It's really easy to get these confused. We quite often see that in exam papers. So take some time now to set a timer, have a go at some of those 4 and 6 mark questions. Take your answers into school for your teacher to mark, and good luck with your ongoing revision.